guys, Vic here. I'm going to do a review on a couple of typology books that I've read over the past couple of weeks. And they're really good books, and I highly recommend them. And I still have a bookshelf full of books that I need to get through, as well as several that are on PDF digitally. So I'll start off with The Art of Speed Reading People by Paul and Barbara Tieger. And so this book is kind of old, but it's still really good and relevant. They introduce the dichotomies, the four letters, and they talk about how do you visually identify people. And so what stood out to me with that book was that they said that dichotomies is a starting point, but it shouldn't be the only means to identify somebody. You should also identify them by their temperament, as well as how they express themselves emotionally. And so the FJs and the TPs, also known as FETI, tend to be very expressive, very like, hey, how's it going? They tend to be warm, more expressive, but the FJs tend to actually generally mean well and be concerned for you, whereas the TPs will be warm and nice to you, but only to fulfill an agenda. Think of like the car salesperson that wants to make the sale. They want to, build a rapport with you and make you feel good. They want you to like them so that they can, make their sale and move on. They're not really interested in like, oh, I want to make friends. It's more like, oh, I want to make the sale. And so this is my agenda, but I know how to build rapport. That's why, especially for the extroverted types, ESTPs and ENTPs tend to appear very warm and likable, but they may have an agenda as well. And so that's how basically you type FETI users is how warm and expressive they are. Whereas the TJs and FPs, or also known as TEFIs, they're not as expressive. They keep their emotions more to themselves. And especially the TE or the TJs, like they tend to be very tough and firm and businesslike. Whereas the FPs tend to be more sensitive, almost like having sad eyes. They don't express their emotions, but you know that they're sensitive to it. And very sweet, nice people. And so that's what stood out to me with this book. And they go over like several different examples on how to visually identify and type people, which most of it I agree with. But of course, it's kind of old and outdated. But a lot of it still applies and is relevant. And I still think it's a good book to read. Another book that I got is People Patterns by Stephen Montgomery. And this is actually a fun little book that is very practical and teaches people about the temperaments based from David Keirsey's research. And then he has a little test in the beginning, a sorter, and then talks about each of the four temperaments, the guardians or the SJs, and then the artisans, the SPs, and the rationals, NTs, and the idealists, NFs. And then once you're able to identify a person by their temperament, then you can be able to identify their type accordingly. And so he gave several really good examples about how to identify them and even how the different temperaments get along. Like SJs and SPs are the most compatible for each other. And that's because the SP is very spontaneous and fun and living in the moment, whereas the SJs are very like cautious and duty based. And for whatever reason, most relationships that work are from this combination, given that the sensing types make up like 75% of the population. And the SJs really appreciate the SPs, fun, spontaneous, and making them relax. And the SPs appreciate the SJs, having a structure and stuff. So like if an SP were to say, hey, I want to go camping, and the SJ will be like, oh, we got to plan this. We got to, decide which gear to take. And both sides can appreciate, even though they can have conflicts. And then as far as the intuitive goes, he says the NT and NFs are probably the best together. Because if you put two NFs together, yeah, they'll emotionally like understand each other. But then at the same time, they might be too sensitive and feelings may get hurt. Whereas if you put two NTs together, they're very like objective and logical, but there's not that deep connection. And so he says the NT and NFs are the best together. And then if you put like an SP and an NT together, then yeah, both of them are pragmatic types that do what works. But they may also have problems like NTs see the big picture and SPs kind of get bored with all the technical stuff that they explain, and the NTs might be frustrated with the SPs like being in the moment. And then he goes over like different examples of how these different temperaments work together, both in relationships, romantic relationships, as well as raising children and in your careers and your jobs, which really like stood out. So highly recommend the book, People Patterns by Stephen Montgomery. Two more books to finish us off is The 16 Personality Types by Linda Berens and Dario Nardi. And this book gives probably the best description of each of the 16 types that I've ever seen. And what I love especially about it is that they have a self-portrait here. So it's read in first person. So I'll do mine's as an example. And if I can find it. So, self-portrait for my type. I'm an ESFP, by the way, for the record. I like variety. It's true, I do like variety. I like people. I am whatever is happening at the moment. I accomplish as much as I can to keep from getting bored. I find something I like and can tolerate, that I can see myself good at down the road. And so, yeah, I agree with those descriptions of me. I do like to get things done, and I get bored easily and easily distracted. So, yeah, best descriptions that I've ever seen for the 16 types, and I've asked people in the personality communities, and they all seem to agree with the descriptions. So the 16 personality types, of course, it doesn't go into detailed explanations about temperaments or interaction styles from Linda Berens. She's got other books published on those, which I haven't read through yet, but I've heard good things about them. And then the final book to finish us off is The Building Blocks of Personality Type by Leona, Haas, and Mark Hunziker, who is a legend in the typology world. And so this book gives a very detailed explanations of each of the 8 cognitive functions, like very detailed descriptions of the cognitive functions, which I really do appreciate. But then this book threw a pleasant surprise at me. It talks about how to incorporate these 8 cognitive functions into your life. And so they have what's called the 8-step system, where, like, say if you're a committee and you want to make a decision, or if you're making a personal decision, you should do each of the 8 steps. And so, and then they talk about Moses as well, and trying to convince the Israelites to leave Egypt and go to the promised land. And so I'll use that one as an example from the book. And so basically, like, he had to appeal to each of the 8 cognitive functions. First of all, the promised land. Nobody knows what the promised land is. But then when he said the land of milk and honey, then people are like, oh, milk and honey. And so the SE types will be like, oh man, well, when I was cleaning the plates of the Egyptians, I got to taste a little bit of the leftover honey and milk, and it's really good. So I bet it's going to have a lot of good food. Sold. And then the SI types, the older people, like, glow and talk about the good old days when they had good food with milk and honey. And of course the current generation has never had it, but the SI users kind of base off the experience of the past that their elderlies have, and they're like, you know what, if this has worked for them in the past, then I think it could work for us. Sold. And then goes on, so forth like that. NE, exploring the possibilities. Oh, can you imagine milk and honey? We can make bread, we can make this and this and that. And then the NIs were like, what's our main purpose here? Our purpose is to go out there and make this happen. And then TEs are like, okay, let's make it happen. And let's actually, like, execute. And then TI's like, but how we're going to do this? What are the details? And then FE's like, well, will everybody feel good about this and agree? And FI is like, no, oh, sorry. And then the FIs is like, do I feel good about this? And so that's basically the 8-step approach. So first it's like, what is the SE? What is, like, what's my current situation? Step 2 is what was my past experience with that? Step 3 is NE. What are the possibilities? What could emerge from this and what could emerge from that? And then step 4, NI, is like, whoa, what's the overall, like, big picture here? What's the overall theme here that we're trying to go for? And then step 5 is TE. Okay, what are some possible, like, plans that we can do? Like, pros and cons of if we do A or if we do B. And then TI is like the details. Okay, how exactly are we going to get from point A to point B? And then that's TI, so that's step number 6. So step number 7 would be FE. So how will the community feel about this? How will people in general feel about this? Will they like this? So back to Moses, like the Israelites, do they feel good about leaving their slavery life and risking themselves to go out to pursue milk and honey? And so then the last one is FI, like how do I feel? Does this line up with my core values and my identity? So anyways, that's a really good book to read, by the way. It is The Building Blocks of Personality Type, the 16 personality types, people patterns, and the art of speed reading people. So thanks for watching, guys. And if you like my channel, click subscribe below. And hope to make more videos, and looking forward to talking to you guys some more. You all have a nice day.